Okay. It must be 8 o'clock because my live stream has just bounced off on me here. So I'm going to pop that here so I can see what I'm doing. And so I can have a chat with you guys as well. Thank you everyone for tuning in as always. I'm happy to see you all. It's Monday night, back on the live stream, back in the Society HQ for another big week ahead. And as a result, I'm having a water right now because I don't normally dram on Monday nights. And I'm not really in the mood tonight because I'm still recovering from the weekend. Anyone who's over 30 will know that the hangover takes 2 days to recover from. Anyway, my name's Matt Bailey. I'm the National Ambassador for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. So good to see you in joining me for this live stream tonight. Tonight is a chance for me to talk about something that's actually been on my mind, and I want your feedback as well on this. I want to hear what you think about this as well. Now, recently, I was at a couple of tastings last week. One on Saturday night, a poker night on Friday night, which wasn't really a stream, and a tasting last Monday, which was the live one that we did with Andrew, which was the AUISC, the Spirits Judging Competition. It was a big week of tasting different spirits. Now, one of the things that came up a couple of times in the week was the discussion around how casks. There was that discussion, especially for local spirits. I should preface by saying I'm talking about Australian whiskies here. There was a discussion about how local spirit. There's always that discussion around the cask, the history of the cask. So, like, this is a 3-year-old ex-sherried whiskey, and the cask was McWilliams. And it was had sherry in it for 40 years, and then it had. And then it was, released to the whiskey world. The reason why I bring this up, and this is not new, by the way. Andrew's brought this up before. I've brought this up before. It's this discussion that keeps happening around what is the importance of talking about the history of the cask, rather than the importance of talking about the evolution of the spirit and the actual maturation of the whiskey in that cask. And I think that's a really important one to make, in that I'm saying that we've hit this point of where every single Australian whiskey these days has to talk about the history or provenance of that cask that it's been in, rather than the development of the spirit and the time of maturation. And I think this is a really slippery slope, and I've seen it more and more. I saw a little bit last year, and even Andrew wrote about it as well last year quite extensively, quite well, about how much transparency do we need, and what's the point of talking about these casks and just talking about the history of the cask too much. But I think it's actually quite a I wouldn't say worrying. This is my little rant. This is my little Monday rant for those who are used to this channel. It's not worrying, but it is kind of it's not concerning. It's just one that to keep an eye on, because I think it is a little bit worrying actually. Now, I'm going to preface by saying I think it is a little bit worrying. We're getting into this realm of where we only talk about we only discuss or focus on the history of the cask rather than the development of the spirit. Now let's delve into that a bit more. When I say that, what I mean by that is, okay, you have a distillery that puts new make spirit into a cask. That's great. That's how whiskey starts. Well, sorry, that's the end of the production line, but that's how whiskey starts being born in the cask. That's great. But if that cask is a previously held bourbon for 3 years, and from some Jim Beam or Maker's Mark or something, that's cool. If that cask was previously held sherry and had been sitting slumbering away in a Spanish bodega somewhere for 60 years, cool. Not much cooler really from an ex-bourbon cask. And if after, let's say, hopefully 3 or 4 or 5 years of maturation, both those casks are now ready to be bottled, and the bourbon, is there one that is going to certainly be better than the other? Is there going to be one that is certainly better than the other? There will be one that is most likely darker than the other in colour, but we've already discussed colour, and that's not really overly important. But is there going to be one that is better than the other? I mean, objectively a better whiskey? And the answer is no, there isn't. In fact, maybe even the ex-bourbon one might taste better. The ex-wine one, the ex-sherry one might taste better as well, conversely. We don't know the answer to that until we've tried both whiskies. And I see a bit of this happening with Australian whiskey of late. Of course, Australian whiskey doesn't buy too much into the ex-bourbon cask trade, as we've seen. A lot of Australian whiskey comes into ex-wine barrels, ex-sherry barrels. That's another kettle of fish entirely. That's a discussion for another day. But what I'm saying is there's this constant reference and callback to the provenance of that cask as a key selling point of that whiskey. And I think that is a dangerous trend to follow, because it doesn't really tell you anything. It tells you about as much as the colour does, nothing at all. So with that said, how do you know whether it's worth getting based off the cask info alone? You don't. You only know if something's worth getting if A, the tasting notes are to your liking. You've read them. You think, that sounds tasty. That sounds like something I would enjoy. B, it's within an affordable price range. We all know what your own affordable price ranges are. Everyone has a different threshold for what they'll spend on whiskey, which always sparks discussion online. And when you see people who will happily spend $49 on a bottle of Monkey Shoulder and nothing more ever, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. There's people who will only ever spend up to $99, and as soon as something like Lafroig 10 goes on special, or Glenlivet 12 goes on special and is suddenly below $99 again, it's like they go nuts, and I think it's the best deal ever. And then there's the third category, I'd say, or not just the third. There's a third category who likes to explore whiskey, doesn't focus too much on price, but there is obviously we all have our own personal thresholds. Me personally, a society bottle for me that is 160, 180, 220. I'm always happy with something like that. 250 even. Once I start getting past 300, for me, this is just my subjective threshold. I go, ooh, I'll need to think twice about that one. I kind of want one, but I want to think about that, budget for that a little bit. Anything past 500 needs to be really quite a special purchase. Obviously, it's something that you want to hold on to for a while, maybe something quite special, maybe a birth year bottling, maybe quite an aged bottling, who knows. You know what, and I don't mean to blow around trumpet here, and I say that with a trumpet on my desk and as a trumpet player, but I have to say, there is, I still think there's some tremendous value in high age statement whiskies, especially coming through the society. Just last year, we had a 30-year-old sherried whiskey from Distillery 9. 30-year-old. It was called, the name of it escapes me at this very moment, something like Pedro Packs a Punch or something like that. It wasn't that one, it was a sister to one of that one, but it was a 30-year-old whiskey from Distillery 9, and it was $4.99. Like, it's a single cask 30-year-old whiskey, sherried whiskey for $4.99. I think that's really good value for a 30-year-old whiskey these days, especially because you can find core range 30-year-old whiskies these days for often $1,200 or more. You see these like easily, especially if they're peated. All right, let me grab some of these. Comments. Nick Husek says, personally, I find a lot of Australian whiskey to taste more tannic than Scotch. Very true, Nick. Absolutely bang on. A lot of them are very tannic, and that's the usage of wine casks. And what I like to often refer to, and I'm treading carefully here, is over-matured, underdeveloped. And it's cooking the spirit in a hot climate. I'm a huge advocate of Australian whiskey, as you all know. I think we're still in a very formative stage in many ways. Let me finish your comment. Is it possible a lot of distilleries advertise barrels as it is contributing more to the flavour? Is it contributing more to the flavour, Nick Husek? That's a really interesting comment. I think they advertise the barrels because they're all trying to find a point of differentiation in what they're creating. A lot of distilleries in Australia, not so much on the mainland, but a lot in Tassie and some in the mainland, all copied the same formula for a long time. There are exceptions to the rule, of course, here and there, and some quite successful. But they all copied sort of what Bill and Lynn Lark did, and that sort of model got copied a few times. Carbon copied the same supply of casks, the same shape and size of stills, the same water supply, the same barley supply, the same mash, I should say, for each one, same wash, I should say, for each one. So the wash, the stills, they're all coming from the same place. There's at least 9, 10, 11 distilleries off the top of my head that all copied that model. So I think their point of differentiation isn't so much that they age in small casks, that they all come from the same cooperage and whatnot, but it's the fact that they are all trying to find a point of differentiation onto the back bar, into your mind, and hopefully onto your palate. But when in fact they're not that different, a lot of them, and a lot of them are quite tannic, quite hot. And again, I'm trying to be as nice as possible here. and it probably doesn't sound that way. But it is, I mean, there's a lot of great Australian whiskey out there. Don't get me wrong, there's heaps. But the fact is, a lot of it is again, a lot of it comes across as quite tannic, quite fizzy on the mid palate, I like to call it, and a little bit underaged. Underaged but overdeveloped. 2-year-old whiskey that tastes like it has the color of a 30-year-old whiskey, but it is has or something like that. And I find it can be quite fizzy. Now I say this with some authority. I mean, I've tasted something like 50 to 55 Australian whiskey samples just in the last week. That's a product of my job. It's a product of being on a tasting panel. It's hard work. I know somebody's got to do it. But, you know, tasting things with Andrew, tasting things at the IAWSC with Andrew, tasting things for SMWS panel with Andrew. So, you know, when we're sending a box that's over on my other desk over there, we're sending a box of Australian whiskey samples to the UK panel. I'm sending them via DHL tomorrow. So, yeah. Oops, don't know where this came from. You're welcome, 45 Finn. You can do your cry laughs anywhere you like. Hartwood Taz joined. Hartwood Taz. Are you here to troll me again, Tim? Good to see you. Malt Official, designed by K9. Good to see you somewhere on guy. So this is something that I've had at length discussions with people like Tim, people like different people in the Australian industry. Met with mixed review. I know I'm a little bit of an outlier on that one. And as I said, I'm in a fortunate position to be a panelist and assessor for lots of different casks that come out of Australia, and some of them are just not quite hitting the mark at the moment. But I keep reminding people it's a young industry. Now, while we haven't got all the kinks ironed out yet, we're not trying to copy Scotch whisky either, and that's a really important point I need to make. Australian whisky shouldn't be there to copy Scotch whisky. It should be there to I guess be a point of differentiation, have a flavour identity of its own as well, and it does. It absolutely does. But anyway, that's each to their own when it comes to this, of course, subjectivity and palate. So what I was trying to talk about was this selling of the cask rather than of the story, and selling of the cask rather than of the actual flavour, and as I say, spirit development. Now, there's not too many distilleries in Australia, and I mean this sincerely. I can count them on one hand, who are putting some serious R&D behind their spirit. And I think that's something that we need to see more of, especially as this industry is young, and we haven't got an SWA that restricts the development and growth of that sort of category. So while I have a whole lot of respect for the SWA, the Scotch Whisky Association in Scotland, that controls the appellation of Scotch whisky and its flavour, its output, if you like. They are relaxing over there, even as we saw last year with the announcement about June, July last year, the announcement that they're going to be allowed to use, I think, cider brandy casks, tequila casks, things like that now in Scotland as well as ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, ex-port, ex-muscat, all those kind of things. So they've opened up the scope as long as it still represents Scotch whisky. Hey, look, Hartwood Taz says, embrace our conditions, make our whiskey. I couldn't have said it better myself. I completely agree with that, Tim. Embrace our conditions. And that's my exact point is that, though, if you're not embracing the conditions, then you're going to be working against them. And I think that's where I think sometimes the paths diverge a bit, and you find these things that maybe quite simply should have been bottled. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents on it tonight. A little bit of a mini rant tonight, only because it's. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't have a whole lot to rant about this time. It's all good news over here. We've just put up the Canberra, just a little news wrap for you. I've put up the Canberra and Hobart events are now up online. Hobart's at Gold Bar, and it's a Saturday afternoon. And the Canberra event is at Sage Restaurant. It's going to be super exciting. Very limited tickets to the Canberra one, I'm afraid. But it's going to be a taste and test, a full whiskey degustation menu for members in Canberra. That's going to be members in the ACT, or in fact, nearby New South Wales. The Whiskey Champs date is confirmed, as I've said before, is the 25th of July. We are going ahead with that date. I'm super excited to be doing that one. It's the biggest whiskey tasting in Australia, and it's every 2 years. I can say that. It's not the biggest whiskey fair. It's not a fair or festival, but it is the biggest whiskey tasting in Australia, and it's held every 2 years, and someone will win the prizes. It's not like, oh, no one won, see you next time. Someone always has to leave with the prizes, even if you get 1 out of 8 correct. But I'll explain the rules. We'll do more videos on the champs in more detail as we lead up to it. J Herd says, while it should be our whiskey and it be different, it should still be of good quality. Couldn't agree more. It should have our identity. We shouldn't be trying to copy the Americans, the Irish, the Scottish, the Indian, the Japanese. Doesn't matter. We should be forging our own identity, and I think we've been very good at that so far. But it has to be still of good quality, and I'm talking objective quality. And stop talking about cask provenance. It gets boring. Malt Official. Well, we'd love to get some more Australian whiskey over here. Last I had was a Caden Heads Cradle Mountain. Yes, those Cradle Mountains are some pretty old casks, and I remember the backstory about those casks. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't I think it was a little bit. That one was the opposite of what I've been talking about. Almost Malt Official. It's kind of they were hyper aged in some ways to the point of being a little bit like licking a fence post. LeWhiskey joined. Good to see LeWhiskey. Nicky's it's time to start training for champs. Yes, champs training. Yes, start tasting core range whiskeys and getting ready. The official list will probably go out, I think, 2 weeks before the actual date it starts. I'll have to double check the rules. I mean, I did write them, but I've still got to double check them so I get them absolutely right. But I think it's 2 weeks before we send out a list of 30 whiskies, of which 8 will be featured on the night. And then you sit down, open the envelope, and off you go. And you have 30 minutes, and it's a solo competition, but you're on team tables, if you like. And then it's the society bar afterwards, and we'll have another special bar there on the night as well, which we're still working out. And it's all included in the one ticket. And the early bird tickets will be up, I think, in March, shortly. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll announce it from the rooftops when it happens, though, don't worry. And what other news have I got for you? Well, I've already mentioned it last week, but keep an eye on your mailbox, because the official letter from the society about the change in ownership of the branch, plus our commemorative unfiltered magazine. Yes, that isn't unfiltered. It's just got a lovely foil cover on it, and of course, everyone gets their new lapel pin that you can spot there. Hope that comes into focus. So you each get the lapel pin, the unfiltered, and the letter, and it should all be. Oh, and March out turn, March out turn as well. Got so much going on. All right. That's all from me tonight. Like I say, not a big rant. Not really a rant at all. Just a chance to have a chat. And as I said, have a glass of water. bit of recovery. And I'll catch you all tomorrow night. This week, I'm traveling a little bit as I do most weeks. But this week's live stream on Thursday will be from elsewhere. I don't know where I'll be at 8 o'clock on Thursday. And then Friday is a special event that which might be a bit of a chaotic live stream on the Friday night. We'll see how we go. Yes, March outturn is coming, guys. I should have mentioned a bit more about that. Of course, it's a little bit of a late one in the month because I think the first Friday falls on like the 6th of March or something like that. Anyone's got their calendar open, they can check that for me. But so it's the first Friday of March. I think it's like the 5th or 6th, something like that, of March. And it's a bumper outturn, really exciting to share. This will be the first outturn in New Society. It won't look any different from the previous outturns, but it's a really lovely chance for us to communicate with you guys and offer up some delicious casks. And I think you're going to be really happy with Malt of the Month, especially. And there is a premium livery bottle in there, which is something quite special indeed. And we'll have to limit that to 1 per member. I'm sorry. That's my spoilers. There you go. That's my spoilers. But more, okay, I'll give you one. It's a Speyside distillery the Malt of the Month is a Speyside distillery of distinction. One of our favourite distilleries at the Society, and possibly Andrew Durbage's favourite distillery of all time. That should be a pretty big clue. I will see you all tomorrow night, and take care and safe dramming.